Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, Chapter 15. A Simple Solution to an Impossible Problem. The day after the renter and I dug up Dad's grave, I went to Mr. Black's apartment. I felt like he deserved to know what happened, even if he wasn't actually a part of it. But when I knocked, the person who answered wasn't him. "Can I help you?" a woman asked. Her glasses were hanging from a chain around her neck, and she was holding a folder with lots of paper coming out of it. "You're not Mr. Black." "Mr. Black?" "Mr. Black, who lives here. Where is he?" "I'm sorry, I don't know." "Is he okay?" "I assume so. I don't know." "Who are you?" "I'm a realtor." "What's that?" "I'm selling the apartment." "Why?" "I suppose the owner wants to sell it? I'm just covering today." "Covering?" "The realtor who represents this property is sick." "Do you know how I can find the owner?" "I'm sorry, I don't." "He was my friend." She told me, "They're coming by sometime this morning to take everything away." "Who's they?" "They, I don't know. Contractors, garbage men, they." "Not moving men?" "I don't know." "They're throwing his things away?" "Or selling them." If I'd been incredibly rich, I would have bought everything, even if I just had to put it in storage. I told her, "Well, I left something in the apartment. It's something of mine, and they can't sell it or give it away. I'm going to go get it. Excuse me." I went to the index of biographies. I knew I couldn't save the whole thing, obviously, but there was something I needed. I pulled out the B drawer and flipped through the cards. I found Mr. Black's. I knew it was the right thing to do, so I took it out and put it in the pouch of my overalls. But then, even though I'd gotten what I wanted, I went to the S drawer. Antonin Scalia, G.L. Scarborough, Lord Leslie George, George Scarman, Maurice Skeeve, Ann Wilson Scaife, Jack Warner Schaefer, Iris Charmel, Robert Haven Schaeffler, Barry Scheck, Johann Scheffler, Jean de Chalandre, and then I saw it, Shell. At first I was relieved because I felt like everything I'd done had been worth it because I'd made Dad into a great man who was biographically significant and would be remembered. But then I examined the card and saw that it wasn't Dad. Oskar Shell, son. I wish I had known that I wasn't going to see Mr. Black again when we shook hands that afternoon. I wouldn't have let go. Or I would have forced him to keep searching with me, or I would have told him about how Dad called when I was home. But I didn't know, just like I didn't know it was the last time Dad would ever tuck me in, because you never know. So when he said, "I'm finished. I hope you understand," I said, "I understand," even though I didn't understand. I never went to find him on the observation deck of the Empire State Building because I was happier believing that he was there than finding out for sure. I kept looking for the lock after he told me he was finished, but it wasn't the same. I went to Far Rockaway and Boerum Hill and Long Island City. I went to Dumbo and Spanish Harlem and the Meatpacking District. I went to Flatbush and Tudor City and Little Italy. I went to Bedford, Stuyvesant, and Inwood and Red Hook. I don't know if it was because Mr. Black wasn't with me anymore, or because I'd been spending so much time making plans with the renter to dig up Dad's grave, or just because I'd been looking for so long without finding anything, but I no longer felt like I was moving in the direction of Dad. I'm not even sure I believed in the lock anymore. The last Black I visited was Peter. He lived in Sugar Hill, which is in Hamilton Heights, which is in Harlem. A man was sitting on the stoop when I walked up to the house. He had a little baby on his knee who he was talking to, even though babies don't understand language, obviously. "Are you Peter Black?" "Who's asking?" "Oskar Shell." He patted the step, which meant I could sit next to him if I wanted, which I thought was nice, but I wanted to stand. "That's your baby?" "Yes." "Can I pet her?" "Him." "Can I pet him?" "Sure," he said. I couldn't believe how soft his head was and how little his eyes were, and his fingers. "He's very vulnerable," I said. "He is," Peter said, "but we keep him pretty safe." "Does he eat normal food?" "Not yet, just milk for now." "Does he cry a lot?" "I'd say so. Definitely feels like a lot." "But babies don't get sad, right? He's just hungry or something?" "We'll never know." I liked watching the baby make fists. I wondered if he could have thoughts or if he was just more like a non-human animal. "Do you want to hold him?" "I don't think that's a very good idea." "Why not?" "I don't know how to hold a baby." "If you want to, I'll show you. It's easy." "Okay." "Why don't you sit down?" he said. "Here you go. Now put one of your hands under here, like that. Good. Now put your other around his head. That's right. You kind of hold it against your chest, right? Like that. You got it. Just like that. He's happy as can be. This is good? You're doing great. What's his name? Peter. I thought that was your name. We're both Peter. It made me wonder for the first time why I wasn't named after Dad, although I didn't wonder about the renter's name being Thomas. I said, "Hi, Peter. I'll protect you." When I got home that afternoon after 8 months of searching New York, I was exhausted and frustrated and pessimistic, even though what I wanted to be was happy. I went up to my laboratory, but I didn't feel like performing any experiments. I didn't feel like playing the tambourine or spoiling Buckminster or arranging my collections or looking through stuff that happened to me. Mom and Ron were hanging out in the family room, even though he wasn't part of our family. I went to the kitchen to get some dehydrated ice cream. I looked over at the telephone, the new phone. It looked back at me. Whenever it would ring, I'd scream, "The phone's ringing!" because I didn't want to touch it. I didn't even want to be in the same room with it. I pressed the message play button, which I hadn't done since the worst day, and that was on the old phone. Message 1. Saturday, 11:52 a.m. Hi, this is a message for Oskar Schau. Oskar, this is Abby Black. You were just over at my apartment asking about the key. I wasn't completely honest with you, and I think I might be able to help. Please give... And then the message was cut off. Abby was the second Black I had gone to 8 months before. She lived in the narrowest house in New York. I told her she was pretty. She cracked up. I told her she was pretty. She told me I was sweet. She cried when I told her about Elephant ESP. I asked if we could kiss. She didn't say she didn't want to. Her message had been waiting for me for 8 months. Mom? Yes? I'm going out. Okay. I'll be back later. Okay. I don't know when. It could be extremely late. Okay. Why didn't she ask me more? Why didn't she try to stop me or at least keep me safe? Because it was starting to get dark and because the streets were crowded, I bumped into a Googleplex people. Who were they? Where were they going? What were they looking for? I wanted to hear their heartbeats and I wanted them to hear mine. The subway station was just a few blocks from her house, and when I got there, the door was open a little, like she knew I'd be coming, even though she couldn't have, obviously, so why was it open? Hello? Is anyone there? It's Oskar Schell. She came to the door. I was relieved because I hadn't invented her. Do you remember me? Of course I do, Oskar. You've grown. I have? A lot. Inches. I've been so busy searching that I haven't been measuring myself. Come in, she said. I thought you weren't going to call me back. It's been a long time since I left that message. I told her, I'm afraid of the phone. She said, I've thought about you a lot. I said, your message? From months ago? How weren't you honest with me? I told you I didn't know anything about that key. But you did? Yes. Well, no. I don't, but my husband does. Why didn't you tell me when we met? I couldn't. Why not? I just couldn't. That's not a real answer. My husband and I had been having a terrible fight. He was my dad. He was my husband. He was murdered. I wanted to hurt him. Why? Because he had hurt me. Why? Because people hurt each other. That's what people do. It's not what I do. I know. I spent 8 months looking for what you could have told me in 8 seconds. I called you right after you left. You hurt me. I'm very sorry. So? I asked. So what about your husband? She said, he's been looking for you. He's been looking for me? Yes. But I've been looking for him. He'll explain everything to you. I think you should call him. I'm angry at you because you weren't honest with me. I know. You almost ruined my life. We were incredibly close. I could smell her breathing. She said, if you want to kiss me, you can. What? You asked me, that day we met, if we could kiss. I said no then, but I'm saying yes now. I'm embarrassed about that day. There's no reason to be embarrassed. You don't have to let me kiss you just because you feel sorry for me. Kiss me, she said, and I'll kiss you back. I asked her, what if we just hugged? She held me against her. I started to cry and I squeezed her as tightly as I could. Her shoulder was getting wet and I thought, Maybe it's true that you can use up all your tears. Maybe Grandma's right about that. It was nice to think about because what I wanted to be was empty. And then, out of nowhere, I had a revelation, and the floor disappeared from under me, and I was standing on nothing. I pulled away. Why did your message cut off? Excuse me? The message you left on our phone. It just stops in the middle. Oh, that must have been when your mother picked up. My mom picked up? Yes. And then what? What do you mean? Did you talk to her? For a few minutes. What did you tell her? I don't remember. But you told her that I'd gone to visit you? Well, yes, of course. Was I wrong to? I didn't know if she was wrong to, and I didn't know why Mom hadn't said anything about their conversation, or even about the message. The key, you told her about it? Well, I assumed she already knew. And my mission? It didn't make any sense. Why hadn't Mom said anything, or done anything, or cared at all? And then all of a sudden, it made perfect sense. All of a sudden, I understood why when Mom asked where I was going, and I said out, she didn't ask any more questions. She didn't have to because she knew. It made sense that Ada knew I lived on the Upper West Side and that Carol had hot cookies waiting when I knocked on her door, and that doorman215@hotmail.com said, "Good luck, Oskar," when I left, even though I was 99% sure I hadn't told him that my name was Oskar. They knew I was coming. Mom had talked to all of them before I had. Even Mr. Black was a part of it. He must have known I was going to knock on his door that day because she must have told him. She probably told him to go around with me and keep me company, keep me safe. Did he really even like me? And were all of his amazing stories even true? Were his hearing aids real? The bed that pulled? Were the bullets and roses bullets and roses? The whole time. Everyone. Everything. Probably Grandma knew. Probably even the renter. Was the renter even the renter? My search was a play that Mom had written, and she knew the ending when I was at the beginning. I asked Abby, "Was your door open because you knew I was coming?" She didn't say anything for a few seconds. And then she said, "Yes." "Where's your husband?" "He's not my husband." "I don't understand. Anything." "He's my ex-husband." "Well, where is he?" "He's at work." "But it's Sunday night." She said, "He does foreign markets." "What?" "It's Monday morning in Japan." "There's a young man here to see you," the woman behind the desk said into the phone, and it made me feel so weird to think that he was on the other end of the line, even if I knew I was getting confused about who he was. "Yes," she said. "A very young man." Then she said, "No." Then she said, "Oskar Schell." Then she said, "Yes, he says to see you." "May I ask what this concerns?" she asked me. "He says his dad," she said into the phone. Then she said, "That's what he says." Then she said, "Okay." Then she said to me, "Go down the hallway. His door is the third on the left." There was art that was probably famous on the walls. There were incredibly beautiful views out the windows which Dad would have loved, but I didn't look at any of it, and I didn't take any pictures. I'd never been so concentrated in my life because I'd never been closer to the lock. I knocked on the third door on the left, which had a sign on it that said, "William Black." A voice from inside the room said, "Come in." "What can I do for you tonight?" said a man behind the desk. He was about the same age as Dad would have been, or I guess still was, if dead people have ages. He had brownish-grayish hair, a short beard, and round brown glasses. For a second he looked familiar, and I wondered if he was the person I had seen from the Empire State Building through the binocular machine. But then I realized that that was impossible, because they're at 57th Street, which was north, obviously. There was a bunch of picture frames on his desk. I looked at them quickly to make sure Dad wasn't in any of the pictures. I asked, "Did you know my dad?" He leaned back in his chair and said, "I'm not sure. Who was your dad?" "Thomas Schell." He thought for a minute. I hated how he had to think. "No," he said. "I don't know any Shells." "New." "Excuse me?" "He's dead, so you couldn't know him now." "I'm sorry to hear that." "You must have known him, though." "No, I'm sure I didn't." "But you must have." I told him, "I found a little envelope that had your name on it, and I thought maybe it was your wife, who I know is now your ex-wife, but she said that she didn't know what it was, and that your name is William, and I wasn't anywhere near the W's yet. My wife? I went and talked to her. Talked to her where? The Narrows townhouse in New York. How was she? What do you mean? How did she seem? Sad. Sad how? Just sad. What was she doing? Oh, nothing really. She was just trying to give me food even though I told her I wasn't hungry. Someone was in the other room while we talked. A man? Yeah. You saw him? He passed by the door, but mostly he was yelling from the other room. He was yelling. Extremely loud. What was he yelling? I couldn't hear the words. Did he sound intimidating? I don't know what that means. Was he scary? What about my dad? When was this? 8 months ago. 8 months ago. 7 months and 28 days. He smiled. Why are you smiling? He put his face in his hands like he's going to cry, but he didn't. He looked up and said, That man was me. You? 8 months ago. Yeah, I thought you were talking about the other day. But he didn't have a beard. Well, he grew a beard. And he didn't wear glasses. He took off his glasses and said, He changed. I started thinking about the pixels and the image of the falling body and how the closer you looked, the less you could see. Why were you yelling? Long story. I have a long time, I said, because anything that could bring me closer to Dad was something I wanted to know. Even if it would hurt me. It's a long, long story. Please. He closed a notebook that was open on his desk and said, It's too long a story. I said, Do you think it's so weird that we were in the apartment together 8 months ago and now we're in this office together? He nodded. It's weird, I said. We were incredibly close. He said, So what's so special about that envelope? Nothing exactly. It's what was in the envelope. Which was this. I pulled the string around my neck and made it so the key to our apartment was on the back and Dad's key rested on the pouch of my overalls. Over the Band-Aid over my heart. Can I see that? He asked. I handed him the key even though I kept the string around my neck. He examined it and asked, Did it say something on the envelope? It said black. He looked up at me. Did you find it in a blue vase? Jose! He said, I can't believe it. You can't believe what? This is truly the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me. What is? I've spent 2 years trying to find this key. But I've spent 8 months trying to find the lock. Well, then we've been looking for each other. I was finally able to ask the most important question of my life. What does it open? It opens a safe deposit box. Well, what's it got to do with my dad? Your dad? The whole point of the key is that I found it in my dad's closet, and since he's dead, I couldn't ask him what it meant, so I had to find it out myself. You found it in his closet? Yes. In a tall blue vase. I nodded. With a label on the bottom. I don't know. I didn't see a label. I don't remember. If I'd been alone, I would have given myself the biggest bruise of my life. I would have turned myself into one big bruise. My father passed away about 2 years ago, he said. He went in for a checkup and the doctor told him he had 2 months to live. He died 2 months later. I didn't want to hear about death. It was all anyone talked about, even when no one was actually talking about it. I needed to figure out what to do with all of his things, books, furniture, clothes. Didn't you want to keep them? I didn't want any of it. I thought that was weird because Dad's things were all I wanted. So to make a long story short, you don't have to make a long story short. I had an estate sale. I shouldn't have been there. I should have hired somebody to take care of it, or I should have given it all away. Instead, I was in the position of telling people that the prices for his belongings weren't negotiable. His wedding suit wasn't negotiable. His sunglasses weren't negotiable. It was one of the worst days of my life. Maybe the worst. Are you okay? I'm fine. It's been a bad couple of years. My father and I weren't exactly close. Do you need a hug? I'll be okay. Why not? Why not what? Why weren't you and your dad exactly close? He said, Too long a story. Can you please tell me about my dad now? Well, my father wrote letters when he found out about the cancer. He wasn't much of a letter writer before. I don't know if he ever wrote, but he spent his last 2 months writing obsessively, whenever he was awake. I asked why, but I really wanted to know why I started writing letters after Dad died. He was trying to say his goodbyes. He wrote to people he barely knew. If he hadn't already been sick, his letters would have been his sickness. I had a business meeting the other day, and in the middle of our conversation, the man asked if I was related to Edmund Black. I told him yes, he was my father. He said, "I went to high school with your dad. He wrote me the most amazing letter before he died. 10 pages. I only barely knew him. We hadn't talked in 50 years. It was the most amazing letter I'd ever read. I asked him if I could see it. He said, I don't think that it was meant to be shared. I told him it would mean a lot to me. He said, it mentions you in it. I told him I understood. I looked through my father's Rolodex. What's that? Phone book. I called every name. His cousins, his business partners, people I'd never heard of. He'd written to everybody, every single person. Some let me see their letters, others didn't. What were they like? The shortest was a single sentence. The longest was a couple dozen pages. Some of them were almost like little plays. Others were just questions to the person he was writing to. What kinds of questions? Did you know I was in love with you that summer in Norfolk? Will they be taxed for possessions I have, like the piano? How do light bulbs work? I could have explained that to him. Does anyone actually die in his sleep? Some of his letters were funny. I mean, really, really funny. I didn't know he could be so funny. And some were philosophical. He wrote about how happy he was and how sad he was and all the things that he wanted to do but he never did. All the little things he did but didn't want to do. Didn't he write a letter to you? Yes. What did it say? I couldn't read it, not for a few weeks. Why not? It was too painful. I would have been extremely curious. My ex-wife, said I was being crazy not to read it. That wasn't very understanding of her. She was right, though. It was crazy. It wasn't reasonable. I was being childish. Yeah, but you were his child. But I was his child. That's right, I'm babbling. To make a long story short, don't make it short. I said, because even though I wanted him to tell me about my dad instead of his, I also wanted to make the story as long as I could because I was afraid of its end. He said, I read it. Maybe I was expecting something confessional, I don't know, something angry or asking for forgiveness, something that would make me rethink everything, but it was matter of fact, more of a document than a letter, if that makes sense. I guess so. I don't know. Maybe I was wrong to, but I was expecting him to say he was sorry for things, tell me he loved me. End of life stuff. But there was none of it. He didn't even say I love you. He told me about his will, his life insurance policy, all those horrible business-like things that feel so inappropriate to think about when someone's died. So you're disappointed? I was angry. I'm sorry. No, there's nothing to be sorry for. I thought about it. I thought about it all the time. My father told me where he'd left things, what he wanted taken care of. He was responsible. He was good. It's easy to be emotional. You can always make a scene. Remember me 8 months ago? That was easy. It didn't sound easy. It was simple. Highs and lows make you feel that things matter, but they're nothing. So what's something? Being reliable is something. Being good. And what about the key? At the end of his letter he wrote, I have something for you. In the blue vase, on the shelf in the bedroom, is a key. It opens a safe deposit box at her bank. I hope you'll understand why I wanted you to have it. And? What was in it? I didn't read the note until after I'd sold all his belongings. I had sold the vase. I sold it to your father. What the? That's why I've been trying to find you. You met my dad? Only briefly, but yes. Do you remember him? It was just a minute. But do you remember him? We chatted a bit. And he was a nice man. I think he could see how hard it was for me to part with those things. Could you please describe him? Gosh, I don't really remember much. Please. Well, he was maybe 5'10". He had brown hair. He wore glasses. What kind of glasses? Thick glasses. What kind of clothes was he wearing? A suit, I think. What suit? Gray, maybe? That's true. He wore a gray suit to work. Did he have a gap between his teeth? I don't remember. Try. Well, he said he was on his way home and he saw the sign for the sale. He told me that he had an anniversary coming up the next week. September 14th. He was going to surprise your mom. The vase was perfect, he said. He said she'd love it. He was going to surprise her? He'd made reservations at her favorite restaurant. It was going to be some sort of fancy night out. The tuxedo. What else did he say? What else did he say? Anything. He had a great laugh, I remember that. It was good of him to laugh. And to make me laugh. He was laughing for my sake, you know. What else? Oh, he had a very discerning eye. What's that? He knew what he liked. He knew when he'd found it. That's true. He had an incredibly discerning eye. I remember watching him hold the vase. He examined the bottom of it and turned it around a number of times. He seemed like a very thoughtful person. He was extremely thoughtful. I wish he could remember more details, like if Dad had unbuttoned his shirt's top button, or if he smelled like shaving, or if he whistled, "I'm the Walrus," while he was holding a New York Times under his arm. Were his lips chapped? Was there a red pen in his pocket? When the apartment was empty that night, I sat on the floor and read the letter from my father. I read about the vase. I felt like I'd failed him. But couldn't you go to the bank and tell them that you'd lost the key? I tried that, but they said they didn't have a box under his name. I tried my name. No box. Not under my mother's name or my grandparents' names. It didn't make any sense. There was nothing that the bank people could do? They were sympathetic, but without the key I was stuck. And that's why you needed to find my dad? Well, I hoped he'd realize that there was a key in the vase and find me. But how could he? We sold my father's apartment, so even if he went back, it would be a dead end, and I was sure he'd just throw the key away if he found it, assuming it was junk. That's what I would have done, and there was no way I could find him, absolutely no way. I knew nothing about him, not even his name. For a few weeks, I'd go over to the neighborhood on my way home from work, even though it wasn't on my way. Heck, it was an hour out of my way. I'd walk around looking for him. I even put up a few signs. To the man who bought the vase at the estate sale on 75th Street this weekend, please contact. But this was the week after September 11th. There were posters everywhere. My mom put up posters of him. What do you mean? He died on September 11th. That's how he died. Oh, God. I didn't realize. I'm so sorry. It's okay. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I didn't see those posters. If I had, well, I don't know what if I had. You'd have been able to find us. Well, I guess that's right. I wonder if your posters and my mom's posters were ever close to each other. He said, wherever I was trying to find him, uptown, downtown, on the train. I looked in everyone's eyes, but none were his. Once, I saw someone I thought might be your father across Broadway in Times Square, but I lost him in the crowd. I saw someone I thought might be him getting into a cab on 23rd Street. I would have called after him, but I didn't know his name. Thomas. I wish I had known it then. He said, I followed one man around Central Park for more than half an hour. I thought it was your father. I couldn't figure out why he was walking in such a strange crisscrossing way. He wasn't getting anywhere. I couldn't figure it out. Why didn't you stop him? Well, eventually I did. And what happened? I was wrong. It was somebody else. Did you ask him why he was walking like that? He said he'd lost something and was searching the ground for it. Well, you don't have to look anymore, I told him. He said, I've spent so long looking for this key. It's hard to look at it. Don't you want to see what he left for you? I don't think it's a question of wanting. I asked him, what's it a question of? He said, I'm so sorry. I know that you're looking for something too, and I know that this isn't what you were looking for. It's okay. For what it's worth, your father seemed like a good man. I only spoke with him for a few minutes, but that was long enough to see that he was good. You're lucky to have a father like that. I'd trade this key for that father. You shouldn't have to choose. No, you shouldn't. We sat there, not saying anything. I examined the pictures on his desk again. All of them were of Abby. He said, why don't you come with me to the bank? You're nice, but no thank you. Are you sure? It's not that I wasn't curious. I was incredibly curious. It's that I was afraid of getting confused. He said, what is it? Nothing. Are you all right? I wanted to keep the tears in, but I couldn't. He said, I'm so sorry. Can I tell you something that I've never told anyone else? Of course. On that day, they let us out of school basically as soon as we got there. They didn't really tell us why, just that something bad had happened. We didn't get it, I guess. Or we didn't get that something bad could happen to us. A lot of parents came to pick up their kids, but since school is only 5 blocks from my apartment, I walked home. My friend told me that he was going to call, so I went to the answering machine and the light was beeping. There were 5 messages. They were all from him. Your friend? My dad. He covered his mouth with his hand. He just kept saying that he was okay and that everything would be fine and that we shouldn't worry. A tear went down his cheek and rested on his finger. But this is the thing that I have never told anyone. After I listened to the messages, the phone rang. It was 10:26, and I looked at the caller ID and saw that it was his cell phone. Oh, God. Could you please put your hand on me so I can finish the rest? Of course, he said, and he scooted his chair around his desk and next to me. I couldn't pick up the phone. I just couldn't do it. It rang, and I couldn't move. I wanted to pick it up, but I couldn't. The answering machine went on, and I heard my own voice. Hi, you've reached the Shell residence. Here's today's fact of the day. It's so cold in Ukasia, which is in Siberia, that breath instantly freezes with a crackling noise that they call the whispering of the stars. On extremely cold days, the towns are covered in a fog caused by the breath of humans and animals. Please leave a message. There was a beep, and then I heard Dad's voice. Are you there? Are you there? Are you there? He needed me, and I couldn't pick up. I just couldn't pick up. I just couldn't. Are you there? He asked 11 times. I know because I've counted. It's one more than I can count on my fingers. Why did he keep asking? Was he waiting for someone to come home? And why didn't he say anyone? Is anyone there? You is just one person. Sometimes I think he knew I was there. Maybe he kept saying it to give me time to get brave enough to pick up. Also, there was so much space between the times he asked. There are 15 seconds between the third and fourth, which is the longest space. You can hear people in the background screaming and crying, and you can hear glass breaking, which is part of what makes me wonder if people were jumping. Are you there? 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 Are you? And it cut off. I've timed the message, and it's 1 minute and 27 seconds, which means it ended at 10:28, which is when the building came down. So maybe that's how he died. I'm so sorry, he said. I've never told that to anyone. He squeezed me almost like a hug, and I could feel him shaking his head. I asked him, Do you forgive me? Do I forgive you? Yeah. For not being able to pick up? For not being able to tell anyone. He said, I do. I took the string off my neck and put it around his neck. What about this other key? He asked. I told him, That's just to our apartment. The renter was standing under the street lamp when I got home. We met there every night to talk about the details of our plan, like what time we should leave and what we would do if it was raining or if a guard asked us what we were doing. We ran out of realistic details in just a few meetings, but for some reason we still weren't ready to go. So we made up unrealistic details to plan, like alternate driving routes in case the 59th Street Bridge collapsed, and ways to get over the cemetery fence in case it was electrified, and how to outsmart the police if we were arrested. We had all sorts of maps and secret codes and tools. We probably would have gone on making plans forever if I hadn't met William Black that night and learned what I'd learned. The renter wrote, You're late. I shrugged my shoulders just like Dad used to. He wrote, I got us a rope ladder just in case. I nodded. Where were you? I was worried. I told him, I found the lock. You found it? I nodded. And? I didn't know what to say. I found it, and now I can stop looking? I found it, and it had nothing to do with Dad. I found it, and now I'll wear heavy boots for the rest of my life. I wish I hadn't found it. It wasn't what you were looking for? That's not it. Then what? I found it, and now I can't look for it. I could tell he didn't understand me. Looking for it let me stay close to him for a little while longer. But won't you always be close to him? I knew the truth. No. He nodded like he was thinking of something, or thinking about a lot of things, or thinking about everything, if that's even possible. He wrote, Maybe it's time to do the thing that we've been planning. I opened my left hand because I knew if I tried to say something, I would just start crying again. We agreed to go on Thursday night, which was the second anniversary of Dad's death, which seemed appropriate. Before I walked into the building, he handed me a letter. What is this? He wrote, Stan went to get coffee. He told me to give this to you in case he didn't get back in time. What is it? He shrugged his shoulders and went across the street. Dear Oskar Shell, I've read every letter that you've sent me these past 2 years. In return, I've sent you many form letters, with the hope that one day I'd be able to give you the proper response you deserve. But the more letters you wrote to me, and the more of yourself you gave, the more daunting my task became. I'm sitting here beneath a pear tree as I dictate this to you, overlooking the orchards of a friend's estate. I've spent the past few days here recovering from some medical treatment that has left me physically and emotionally depleted. As I moped about this morning, feeling sorry for myself, it occurred to me, like a simple solution to an impossible problem, today is the day. I've been waiting for it. You asked me in your first letter if you could be my protege. I don't know about that, but I would be happy to have you join me in Cambridge for a few days. I could introduce you to my colleagues, treat you to the best curry outside India, and show you just how boring the life of an astrophysicist can be. You can have a bright future in the sciences, Oskar. I'd be happy to do anything possible to facilitate such a path. It's wonderful to think what would happen if you put your imagination towards scientific ends. But Oskar, intelligent people write to me all the time. In your 5th letter you asked, what if I never stop inventing? That question has stuck with me. I wish I were a poet. I've never confessed that to anybody, and I'm confessing it to you because you've given me a reason to feel that I can trust you. I've spent my life observing the universe, mostly in my mind's eye. It's been a tremendously rewarding life, a wonderful life. I've been able to explore the origins of time and space with some of the greatest living thinkers, but I wish I were a poet. Albert Einstein, a hero of mine, once wrote, "Our situation is the following. We are standing in front of a closed box which we cannot open." I'm sure I don't have to tell you that the vast majority of the universe is composed of dark matter. The fragile balance depends on things we'll never be able to see, hear, smell, taste, or touch. Life itself depends on them. What's real? What isn't real? Maybe those aren't the right questions to be asking. What does life depend on? I wish I had made things for life to depend on. What if you never stop inventing? Maybe you're not inventing at all. I'm being called in for breakfast, so I'll have to end this letter here. There's more I want to tell you and more I want to hear from you. It's a shame we live on different continents. One shame of many. It's so beautiful at this hour. The sun is low, the shadows are long, the air is cold and clean. You won't be awake for another 5 hours, but I can't help feeling that we're sharing this clear and beautiful morning. Your friend, Stephen Hawking.